Quality, comfort, and grip at an affordable price. Whether it's our standard, pro, or elite socks, there's an option for everyone. Try a pair for yourself now at puregripsocks.com.
It's not uncommon to describe a comfortable pair of football boots as feeling like a pair of slippers. It's a figure of speech. But what if the boots actually have the same comfort, lockdown, and structure of actual slippers? Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the brand new Adidas Copa Pure 3 Elite Laceless, a football boot that sees the return of the modern laceless leather Copa concept, something that Adidas took a one-generation break from with the Pure 2. However, it's back on the Pure 3, and unlike past laceless Copa models, these do not cost you any more than the version with laces, bearing a retail price of $250, which would also make it the least expensive laceless Copa ever and the least expensive top-end laceless football boot currently on offer from the three stripes. Having said that, if you're going to remove the laces on a pair of football boots, especially with an upper as soft and less structured as you have in the Pure 3 Elite, you typically have to add some structure in to make that concept work. However, in the case of the laceless Pure 3 Elite, all Adidas have really done here is made the upper a one-piece enclosure and filled in the gap with some elasticated prime knit, which is effectively the same thing that they did with the laceless F50 and the laceless Predator. However, both of those boots feature uppers that have more structure and rigidity to them than what this leather fusion skin material has. Where of course we're going to go over the good and bad as we cover all the details of the new laceless Copa, but to make a long story short, if you really prioritize comfort rather than lockdown, these might be the right boots for you. Where if you're interested in learning why that's the case, please stick around, watch the entire review. We'll go over all the details, including how they fit and feel on feet. And if you are by chance interested in a pair of these for yourself, you can pick them up below the normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes via the first link down below. And as always, if you guys enjoy the unsponsored, brutally honest content on this channel, don't forget to drop a like on the video and make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2025. So first things first, if you look at the laceless and lace variations of the Pure 3 Elite side by side, you'll notice that at least from the outside, there is hardly any difference whatsoever, where I was kind of half expecting at the very least that the internals of this football boot would be a little bit more structured and rigid because of the laceless design, but instead it's exactly the same super smooth microfiber material lining the entire inside of the upper that feels fantastic against your foot, super soft and comfortable, but certainly adds no real structure or rigidity, which you typically need to add in because you're taking away a lot of that lockdown and structure by removing the laces, where of course on the normal variation, you have this nice deep central lacing system with elasticated prime knit filling in the middle, but it's attached on either side just beneath the lace hole, so it's not a free floating tongue. You have that little memory foam insert closer towards the bottom just to help cut down on lace bite and generally just add a little bit of a soft patch on the top of your foot. And of course, once you tie the laces tight, despite this upper being on the softer, less structured side, it still provides really nice lockdown, and they even give you that extra lace hole at the top if you're finding that your heel isn't perfectly secure. Having the lacing system grab a little bit higher and a little bit deeper will typically alleviate that problem almost immediately. Where with the laceless model, all Adidas have really done to remove the laces is fill in the central portion of the upper with an elasticated prime knit, and of course give it a little bit more of a seamless design in terms of how the two sides of the upper attach. But you can still very clearly see fused underneath that fusion skin top layer where the stitching is for where the cutout would normally be. As far as this elasticated prime knit is concerned, it's not far off what you're going to find again from the F50s as well as the Predators, in that it does have two different types of patterns within the knit itself, but for the most part, it's pretty stretchy all the way through. There's nothing on the underside to restrict that stretch, and what you'll definitely find is when you put these boots on, especially when you bend your foot, this expands and stretches quite a bit with very little restriction, and it's almost a guarantee, even with grip socks, that your heel is going to lift from the base of the sole at least a little bit, which really gives this sensation of a lack of lockdown and generally a lack of stability. Where, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to suggest that they're uncomfortable, because that's absolutely not the case, but I do think that they don't feel very performance oriented in terms of how your foot is kind of able to float around inside of this boot as you move around, especially when the pace picks up. Where, of course, lockdown and responsiveness isn't everything in a pair of football boots. You can play in a pair of classic Copa Mundials and not necessarily have the best responsive feel, but at the very least, your heel is locked in and you feel secure inside of the football boots. This, I would say, has one of the looser feels that I've ever had from a pair of top-end football boots, where in general, if you like a super loose feel to your football boots, these might be exactly your cup of tea. But if that's not something that you're into, which I think would be the case for the vast majority, I don't think that these have the most performance-oriented feel. They almost feel like a pair of football boots that were designed for coaches to wear, where they're not really running around very much and they're not really moving quickly. They're just wanting to be comfortable and pass the ball around a little bit when they need to. Where I guess I should clarify, and you'll see this a little bit more when we get the boots on feet later in the video, is that while I think they feel loose on feet, the shaping of the boot is still quite good, where it does wrap your foot very closely. It's just the fact that this laceless system, that I'd argue maybe runs a little bit too deep for how much structure this upper has, allows the upper to stretch and expand a little bit too much when your foot bends and moves, which inevitably happens when you're playing this sport in general. As far as touch and feel is concerned, they're fantastic. I really like this Fusion Skin upper on the Pure 3, where of course the major difference coming from the laced variation is the slightly cleaner feel you get across the top of the foot because of this laceless design. Is it going to make for a better touch than the laced variation? I suppose there's an argument to be made there if you really feel like extra bulk from that lacing system really bothers you. But personally, I would take the little bit of extra bulk and certainly the added structure and lockdown that comes with the laced variation in favor of the slightly cleaner touch that you get from the laceless model, just given all the other downsides that come along with this particular design. The Fusion Skin upper still features that really soft calf skin in the forefoot that fuses pretty well seamlessly into a synthetic material through the midfoot that is still super soft, again, to a fault because of the laceless design, but the touch as a whole, super consistent. I know there's a lot of people that will gripe about the fact that these are calfskin for $250 rather than kangaroo leather like we used to get on the modern Copa series, but it's just the way that the football boot market has gone over the last couple of years, and from a softness perspective, this feels about as soft as any leather that you're going to get on the market right now, so I'm not going to be too picky about it. As far as grip on the ball is concerned, this has a little bit more of a matte finish than what the launch colorway had, but nonetheless, there's really not much in the way of extra grip. It's kind of just that smooth, natural leather finish that most leather boots tend to have. They do talk about some micro texturing within the Adidas stripes as well as here on either side of the forefoot. It's very, very subtle, but it's one of those things that is so subtle that you pretty much don't notice it. Again, from a grip perspective, there's just not a lot of extra grip to be had here. Moving to the rear, you're going to find the same low cut design as the laced variation, which I think is a huge improvement over the previous generation. It has a little bit of an extended back and then slightly targeted padding on the inside with this really nice and soft microfiber liner that doesn't have a lot of structure up high that I think makes for a lot of added comfort. You'll see this modification on a lot of pro issued football boots. There is some structure down low and you do have a little bit of kind of a mini external heel counter from the actual sole plate tooling itself, but for the most part, really, really comfortable, but arguably just a little bit too padded and a little bit too slick, again, given the lack of lockdown and structure from this laceless system, where definitely I would recommend if you really want these boots and you want the best possible lockdown, grip socks are going to be your friend here. They're not going to fix all the problems, of course, but they're definitely going to help control a little bit of that slippage that you're going to get in the heel. However, because this material is so soft and so nicely padded, even if your heel is moving a little bit, which it inevitably will, it shouldn't cause any issues with discomfort, again, as long as you're wearing decent socks. And then as far as the insole is concerned, I'll remove that really quickly. You can see that it's made from a single layer of this soft mesh material, and then on the underside it's pretty much entirely made from ortholite, where there's a blue section and a red section. I'm not sure if these are actually different densities of foam. The red maybe feels a little bit firmer than the blue, but as far as high-end football boot insoles go, these are actually above average in terms of overall quality and actually feel pretty nice underfoot. Moving to the base, you're going to find the Pure 3's new comfort frame sole plate and stud pattern, where finally the modern Copa series is getting its own proprietary design that I actually think feels really, really good, and I like the fact that it is slightly different from all the other stud patterns within the Adidas brand, in that technically you get 4 studs along the outside of the forefoot from the FG variation rather than just 3. You can see, of course, that they've kept things relatively traditional as far as design is concerned. The sole plate itself is definitely more geared towards being flexible rather than providing that super responsive feel, but I think it's well suited to a football boot like this, with or without laces. And as far as that FG stud pattern is concerned, again, majority conical studs in the forefoot, all conical studs underneath the heel, some blades at the base of the forefoot with 1 support blade stud as well. The priority here is that freedom to twist and pivot, but because of the slightly longer stud length and narrower profile of these rounded studs, the traction that you get here is more aggressive in terms of the bite provided than I think a lot of people would expect, where again, it might look old school, but it still performs extremely well. And then there's the weight, where the Pure 3 Elite with laces is already a lot lighter than I think a lot of people would expect. So maybe this laceless design, saving of material, brings the weight down even further. Both in the same size 9.5 US. We'll start off with the standard lace variation, and you can see that they weigh in at 7.5 ounces, the equivalent of 212 grams. Remember those numbers, change the scale back to ounces, and we'll throw on the laceless model, and you can see that they weigh in at 7.5 ounces, 213 grams. Meaning that by removing the laces and in turn making the lockdown and overall stability of the boot significantly worse, they have also increased the weight by 1 gram. In other words, there's pretty much no difference. They're both light. On feet, as much as I don't care for how unstructured this upper is in a lot of ways, I can't deny that they are incredibly comfortable. Probably the most comfortable laceless boots I've genuinely ever had on my feet, which is a great thing, I think, if you're into the whole laceless thing, but also not the best if you want your football boots to be a little bit more performance oriented, where when you're spending $250, I think lockdown and general responsiveness is something that a lot of people are going to be after. And these, unfortunately, not to say that they are unwearable, because that couldn't be further from the truth, but certainly when it comes to lockdown, this is about the least amount of it that you can get from a pair of top-end football boots in 2025. Where simply put, if you're after a pair of laceless football boots from Adidas and you do want something more performance-oriented, you would be much better off with the laceless F50 or the laceless Predator, both of which I actually think are really good boots if you're into the whole laceless thing. As far as the Pure 3 Elite Laceless is concerned, however, the upper, super soft, obviously. The heel lockdown, because there just isn't a lot of structure from the upper or the laceless system, you will find that your heel does lift almost immediately as soon as your foot bends. Again, wearing grip socks like I'm wearing now will definitely help that situation, but it won't fix it entirely. So definitely something to be aware of if, again, you're a little bit of a stickler for having as much lockdown and security from your football boots as possible. From a width perspective, because the upper has such little structure and so much stretch to it, it is going to be the most accommodating of all the laceless boots from Adidas as far as being friendly for wide feet. Not to say that these are going to be a great option for somebody with wide feet, because again, all the same downsides apply regardless of the width of your feet, but certainly if you need that extra width and you absolutely must have a pair of laceless football boots, these would certainly be your best option. And then as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you are looking to get a pair, I would strongly recommend going true to size. And as always, but especially with these, if you're going the laceless route, I would strongly recommend buying your boots with as little extra space as possible, just because you don't have that adjustability. This pair in particular, with extra room to grow, would just be so sloppy on your feet. I think they might actually be dangerous at that point. To make a long story short, they are subjectively very comfortable football boots, but objectively, especially when you're talking about performance, perhaps a little bit too unstructured. At least for what I think most people would expect from a pair of top performing football boots. So in conclusion, the Laceless Copa Pure 3 Elite might just be the worst, most comfortable football boot I've ever worn. Whether or not that's a good or bad thing at the end of the day is very much going to depend on personal preference as well as personal use case, where again, I think for coaching purposes, this is actually a fantastic pair of football boots if you never want to have to deal with your laces. But like I said, when it comes to overall stability and lockdown, this is about as poor as it gets for a pair of top-end football boots. But they are really comfortable and I think the touch is fantastic. However, if you just want the best version of the new Copa Pure 3, you would be crazy not to go for the version with laces.